Hi, everybody, and welcome back to a very, very special episode that is hosted by the Unstoppable Mindset podcast. This is the Sports Roundtable, and tonight it's a very special episode because this is episode 4, and we've got all 4 members of this. So we are absolutely stacked tonight. We've got Morgan in the house, we've got Bill in the house, we've got Kim in the house. I will be your host tonight, Keegan Lamar, and I am absolutely thrilled about some of the topics that we're going to be diving into. We've got 2 on the docket tonight. And the first one was nominated by Morgan. So Morgan shared an article with us, which is a big one, especially for any off-season activities within any sport, because during the off-season, contracts are always signed and athletes are always taken into consideration to be able to be signed, to be retained on teams, movements are made, and all these different things. But one of the big things that a lot of people don't realize is that the offseason, especially when it gets to the end of a rookie contract, can be a very big time in an athlete's career, especially from a professional level, because this is the time where the athlete wants to position themselves to get the largest contract, because it's going to be the first contract that really starts to net them money. They've spent years paying their dues to the dirt. And so there's this balance of how you push yourself from a sports perspective, but also protect yourself from a business perspective. So we're going to dive into the balance between business and sports a little bit. And I'm going to introduce the article here in a moment. The second article that we are going to be diving into is that the NBA playoffs are here. And one thing, there's basketball on almost every night. And one of the things that, especially in basketball, that we're seeing right now is the battle between teams for long series, but also understanding all of the factors that players and coaches don't control. Specifically, it could be traveling, going back and forth, or playing the same team over and over and over, and the mental side of all of that. But then also going through playing the referees, right? You may be getting similar referees for each game. They might be getting switched up, and you see all the time. And this happens in every sport where the refs are a part of the game. You have to understand how to play them, even though you don't control them. So it opens up the conversation of playing a game in which there are factors that you simply can't control, and how you put yourself in a position to be able to deal with those things, and maybe pulling up a couple of great examples of people who either do really well with those things and people who don't do well with them. So with that said, the rules, as always, are we will be going around the bend. There is 90 seconds on the clock to be able to have people respond. And that's really it. And when we get to the end, we'll have plenty of open discussions. So with all that said, let's go ahead and dive into topic number 1. I'll introduce this. So there are athletes such as Deebo Samuel, AJ Brown, Terry McLaurin, and a whole bunch of other athletes who are going to skip some on-field work during the off-season programs because they're pushing for new contracts. Now, this happens, like I said, in every single sport. So one of the big things that I want to open up this conversation with, and Kim, I'm going to come to you first, is when it comes to athletes, and this I'm going to bring around to everybody. When it comes to athletes, what do you think is going through an athlete's head when a contract is coming to an end and they're starting to think about that second contract? What do you think the mental factors are that they're dealing with?
What's next? And if I don't get what I want this time, where am I going and who am I going to do it with? There's a little bit more leverage based on their rookie season, right? So if they're doing well, if they had a good breakout performance season, if there were plays, if there were situations where they're doing really well, they now have gained leverage, right? And maybe a little bit of maturity. As we all know, these are young men coming into a professional realm. They're still young in their mindset. Their brains still aren't fully developed. If we think about that piece of it, I think we forget when you're 6'5" and 300 pounds, we forget they're still overgrown, huge babies. They're still young. And I still think that some of that comes into play. It's the mindset of, where am I going to get paid? Who do I enjoy playing with? How is my reality with the coaching staff that I'm working with? What was my experience being in this professional realm for the very first time? And what are my options? And we see all kinds of things happening now because business is top of mind. What's my branding? How am I doing this online? What's my Instagram profile? What's my social media? How can I leverage this? And I think that they're going to be looking not only for new contracts, but also what are my exit strategies over the course of how many years? They're getting more savvy. I think our athletes are much more savvy now, and they don't want to beat their head into a pulp all the time.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Bill, what do you think's going through an athlete's head when they're in this phase?
Oh, I mean, I still like to believe in the institution, right? I mean, the 80-20 rule, I think 80% of the athletes are committed to their teammates, their regimen, their craft. They want to excel. They want to win championships. They form that. I mean, there's always a lot of noise around that 10 or 20%, right? And most of those individuals are very electric, not only on the field, but from a personality perspective. So it gets a lot of attention. I don't know, obviously, what goes through their head, but I wish I did. I wish I would have had to, make a decision when I was playing, or, being drafted out of high school. Do you go to college for your degree, so you have that, or do you sign that 6 or 7 figure contract? So, at the end of the day, if they go out and produce, nobody's going to care, right? Until they hold out again, and then they'll make noise. But yeah, I don't think we should be faulting them for wanting to take care of themselves, maybe change the legacy within their family, create that generational wealth if they can. But I do think still 80%, that's a general number, not an exact Gallup poll number. 80% are still committed to the process and being part of, honoring your contract and playing it out.
Absolutely. Morgan, what do you think's going through an athlete's head during this time?
Money, and injury. Football is a dangerous sport. They see these big contracts, $120 million that Hill just got made, from the Chiefs got 72 guaranteed. These guys, like Kim said, 26, 24, 26 is their ages. They're looking at the future of their family's family, the people around them. They want to get paid. They don't want to be injured, and they've got a short career. They know that. Not many people are Jerry Rice. Not many people are Moss. Not many people are playing football for a long period of time. I was just talking to somebody today about these people that you think are playing football for a long period of time, because you think it's a game that everybody's playing for, but you see these people and you're like, you're heroes, right? They've been playing the game forever. Well, what's the longevity of a football player? 2, 3, 4 years? I mean, it's nothing
2.5
really.
years in the NFL,
right? And so, I mean, these star guys are like, if I can get paid $72 million guaranteed, I'm taking it. I'm not there's no loyalty to me in this game of football or any sport where I can get paid $72 million to play a game I love, but know that my longevity might be 2 years. And I'm going across the middle. It could be any day where I'm done. And I'm getting 72 guaranteed. I'm waiting for that contract, and I'm holding out $50,000 a day. You know what? I'm probably not going to pay it anyways, because I'm not going to have to, because I'm going to get a large check. So I'm holding out, and it's about the money, and it's about injuries, and it's about my family.
Absolutely. Okay, so my take on this is what must be going through an athlete's head, especially during this time, is what do they really want, right? They're coming to the end of their rookie contract. They want to know, what are my goals? I've been in the league. I've played, doesn't matter what sport it is. I've played for a little bit. What are my goals for this, right? Where do I want to go with this? Do I want to just use this for a couple more years, or do I really want to push to be at the top, having blockbuster deals and all this other stuff? And am I willing to put in the work that it takes to get there? Then what's the reality? Are you a starter? Are you rotating in? Are you fighting for time still? What's your reality for your situation, and being honest about it? Because there are people who hold out and have not earned the right to hold out. And then there are people who have earned every single right to hold out, and they choose not to. They just go out there and, if anything, they may increase their stock a little bit. So you have to understand where you sit in this entire endeavor. Then what are your opportunities? Kim brought up a really good point here. What do you want to do after sports? What are your options? If you want to stick with this, all right, what are your options for moving forward? Do you want to stay with your team? Do you potentially want to move somewhere else? Do you like your teammates? Do you feel like you have a good support system? And then what's your willingness to actually do that? right? That's the biggest thing, especially when it comes to athletes, is anything can be achieved if you're willing to put in the work and go through the adversity. So, and that whole thing is the GROW model, GROW. I feel like that's got to be going through these athletes' heads more than ever. Next question that I want to come around for this, and Morgan, I'm going to come back to you. We're going to go back around the other way, is holdouts have not always been around. Like it is something that I don't even know how long holdouts have actually been in terms of contracts and other stuff from athletes, but are they improving the game? Are they degrading the game? I want to understand your pros and cons on the actual holdout process for an athlete.
You know what? I was going back to what Bill was saying because I didn't have enough time to say anything about what he said. But you know, I don't want to say it's a gone by an era. I don't, you know, I'm almost 50 now and playing sports all my life. It was Michael Jordan. It was Detroit. I mean, it was like people didn't change, you know, teams as they do now. So when did that start happening? I don't know. I mean, it's not like, you know, the entitlement generation, everybody gets the medal. These kids grow up and they're like, you know, there's no loyalty. They just go wherever they want. I don't believe that's the case because like Bill said, I believe that to be true. I can see it, you know, with my own son and my own people that I've coached in my life and my own teammates as I grew up. But, you know, the young kids, they want to play, they want to be part of a team. It's that camaraderie. That's why you play sports a lot, is because of the camaraderie and the teammates that you have and the love that you have, not only for the sport, but the people you play it with, right? That's why a lot of guys, they leave the sport and are lost because they miss the camaraderie. It's not the sport, you know, they miss the support. So, you know, with that said, it's a tough situation where, I don't know, man. I think the people that are playing the game are just playing it because they want to play and they love it. So it's tough for all sides.
Yeah. Bill, pros and cons of the holdout.
Yeah, I mean, first one I remember, you know, being a Seahawks fan, I remember Walter Jones, you know, and this was back Hasselback and that era, and he would hold out. He was franchised, and he would just hold out and then arrive when you had to for camp, and it worked out well for him. Right, first ballot, I think, Hall of Famer. Very healthy, very successful career. The thing about that, though, it might have been a little different time too. He didn't have noise around him, right? Like he wasn't like Zeke, where he's, you know, on Twitter at Cabo, you know, hanging out at the beach. And so I think the con of it is, if you're going to do your thing, do it. You know, be strong in your conviction, have your plan, have your purpose, but just stay in your lane. When you step outside of it, you know, Terrell Owens doing sit-ups and crunches in his driveway, like that's when I think, although teammates are very loyal, right? But that's when I think in the clubhouse, people are like, all right, I'm out here working my tail off. Like that's a little too much to me. But I do believe there is a level of respect for the individuals that make their choice, stay in their lane, and then come back and produce. They're in good shape. They got to get a little rust off, but they're clearly a quality high-end teammate. And so that to me would be the pro when you do it that way. The con is when it becomes about you and you're creating your own noise.
Absolutely. Kim, pros and cons of the holdout.
I think, again, this is a blend between the individual and the role of that individual on a team. And teams win championships, right? And one player doesn't just win a championship. And I think that depending on the person, depending on the personality, I mean, bringing up Terrell Owens and all that stuff, and we all know how good of a player he was, but there was that kind of schmuck characteristic about him doing the things that he was doing, which does negatively impact the other players who may not have the talent that he might have had and work their butts off and don't have the contract that he was having. Again, there is a fine line, I think, between what is right for me and my family and my life and my money versus what is my job in general. It is a job. And what is my responsibility? Because I certainly can't do a holdout with my company that I work with in a regular job and say, I'm not going to come to work today because I didn't get my contract, right? So I do think that there's a lot of privilege associated with this process. And I think that there's some arrogance associated with it as well. And I think that is some of the con part of it, is that does create entitlement. It does create this expectation that I don't have to do my job. And so it needs to be, tread carefully, is my opinion on that.
Yeah. And I'm going to take a slightly different approach, Kim, than what you just said. I think one of the biggest pros to the holdout process is that it's the free market at work. If somebody feels like they are valuable, then obviously you just hold out and you say, pay me what I'm worth. And obviously it's, go get the bag. I'm always going to be a player person. Like, go get your bag, right? Like you work hard for it. It's a short career. Once you're done, you have a whole slew of challenges that are going to be waiting for you as soon as you're done with sports: identity loss, figuring out what the hell you're going to do with the rest of your life. If you want to do anything else, your whole financial situation, all that stuff, you have all that waiting for you. So go get your bag while you can. But the biggest con, and we've touched on this, is you immediately introduce people either standing by you, or you suddenly become the topic of conversation amongst teammates.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And people start getting sick of it. When you are a part of a group, you're part of a team, you're part of an organization, and you're supposed to be a part of it, not just like this single entity within it, it can piss a lot of people off. And so if you're going to take on that side of the negotiation, putting yourself in a position where you can be a bit polarized, as long as you're willing to embrace that and realize that that's going to happen, then go for it. But it's one of the biggest things that a lot of athletes don't take into account when they come back to the team. Ooh, the first buzzer comes on me. God dang it. Okay. So when it comes to bringing this out to a close, because I think, when it comes to the holdouts and other stuff like that, I think those are probably two really good questions. I do want to open it up, and I want to see if there's anything that we didn't cover specifically on this, because there's not necessarily anything that I could say, hey, how would you coach somebody who's going through this, or how would you deal with that? I think that's probably a whole nother conversation in itself, but I'm curious when it comes to this. And I want to open up the floor here. Thoughts, comments, concerns about whether it's holdouts or kind of athletes exploring this free market for themselves, and the mindset behind all this stuff. I want to open it up and hear your all's thoughts and get a little bit of banter going here.
I got a little thought. We didn't talk about ownership. We didn't talk about leadership. I think that's a big issue, is how ownership and leadership handles this. Because I think, like we touched on a little bit, Keegan, I think you did, is with, and Kim, you touched on it. These are young men, and they're looking for something, right? They're looking for money. They're looking for support. They're looking for more accolades. They're looking for something, and it's not always money, but they want to get paid.
Yeah.
But how does leadership handle this? Do they say, hey, listen, Brown, you know what? We're going to take care of you. I promise you, we're going to take care of you. We're going to make sure you're taken care of. If you get hurt, we're going to take care of you. If you don't have a good season, we're going to take care of you. What kind of conversations are being had? I'm sure some leaders and some owners are having very positive, constructive, supportive conversations. And some are not saying anything at all. And by not saying anything, they're saying negative things, right? So I think it's interesting on leadership, how each leader, and you guys know what I'm talking about. There's toxic cultures all over the place, and there's cultures that you just want to be part of. So I think communication, leadership, and the way people feel supported, I think, is something we didn't really touch on. I think is a big part of it.
Yeah. And now this is more of a personal opinion about that. I think when it comes to leadership and you start having someone go through a holdout, I think one of the things that starts getting muttered around is not only, you think of Zeke, you have to imagine that there were plenty of Johnny Walker Blue conversations that occurred around, hey, how do we take care of this guy? How do we help him out? Same thing with Dak, right? Like as his contract was coming around, how do we take care of them? How do we let them know and feel like this is home? But that there's also got to be those conversations if you're leadership to say, well, what if we all of a sudden don't come to the table with what they feel is fair, or if they feel like there's something a little bit juicier for them out there, what if they start looking elsewhere, and how do we cover our butts? But it's a very tough game to play, because the moment you start saying, what are our options as an organization, if the player gets a hold of that, it turns into, I'm sorry, but a complete and total shit show at that point. And it's just, everything explodes. So, and Bill, with you from a team perspective, I'm curious about where you would sit on kind of that balance between the leadership role in all of this.
I think Morgan was spot on with it. I think the role, and you do, not that this hasn't happened here and there in multiple, organizations, but there's certain organizations you just don't hear this out of a lot, right? Like there's a high level of communication, you assume, right? Because just nobody's coming out. And, the Patriots are an example of that. Obviously, they had leadership at the top, but, even with Tom Brady gone, it's still, pretty the Patriot way, so to speak. So, I mean, I do. I think when you have a trusted leader, right? I think that's one thing. Like Jerry Jones gets a bad rap, just because he's Jerry Jones, but he's really stuck by some of his guys. I mean, Zeke's still on the roster. He took care of Dak even after that leg injury. The young man, I think it was Jalen Ramsey or Jalen Smith, the linebacker that, they drafted after that leg injury in the bowl game. So he's stuck by some players. And so what you don't hear ever really is, wow, Jerry followed through with stuff. So, and I'm sure to a certain degree that's known within the league in these examples, but there are other, and I'm a Seahawks fan, right? And it drives me nuts. Like I hear Bobby Wagner come out, after all those years, and he found out basically via Twitter or social media that after all those years, he got let go. Like that's a staple of Super Bowl appearances and victories. So you just know something's off there. And so that I agree. That's quite a bit of dialogue to say. I think there's certain organizations you don't hear a lot from, and that's because they're being transparent. And if it's a tough conversation, they're probably having it, right? So there's no gray area. There's no doubt.
Kim, what's your thought on leadership's role in this type of situation?
Well, I think like any organization, there's, as Morgan talked about, there's toxic cultures and there's not toxic cultures, right? And I think that we're in an era of, we're all in glass houses, much more so than we ever were before. And if you're not transparent, finding things out on social media that you're fired through Twitter and things like that, like fundamental leadership qualities of how to communicate with people who you have your charge over, whether you're seeing a lack of commitment at the youth level across all sports because parents are having kids bounce between, I'm seeing it in the girls in youth soccer, of bouncing around. There's no commitment. There's no loyalty. I don't get what I want. My daughter didn't make varsity and it's the coach's fault. And so I'm going to take this kid and move her to a different high school. And because literally this occurred at my high school with a player of mine, that this mom lost her ever loving mind because her daughter didn't get selected to the varsity team, even though I actually abstained from the decision because I knew that player and didn't know the others. So I didn't even participate. The other three coaches made the decision, but all of a sudden it's my fault, right? And this kid doesn't learn what loyalty is. This kid doesn't learn consequences to you're just not good enough to be at the next level. And what do you need to do to earn it? So I think it starts at a youth level. It's been here for years. So I don't see anything changing anytime soon. I think the situation is going to get worse, where we do have more and more people who are saying, I didn't get what I wanted, and I'm going to go over here, and you're going to get someone who's willing to give it to you, right? Yeah. And I think it dilutes the fundamental point of what Morgan brought up about why did we start playing sport to begin with when we were little? And we are playing a game. And I recognize this is at a high level. And we're talking millions of dollars and we're talking billions of dollar franchise fees, et cetera. This is a business. But when we're talking about when youth are looking up to colleges and going through the transfer portal and saying, well, I didn't get what I wanted. I'm going to go to this one. I'm going to go to this one. And again, like I've talked about, I bleed blue and gold for where I played soccer. And yes, I left my senior year because of an issue with the coach, but my loyalty to my team was steadfast. You couldn't have paid me to go to another school because my degree from that school mattered more than anything, and my teammates and friendships mattered more than anything. I also didn't have a heck of a lot of money over my head to be dealing with, but I still maintained my scholarship.
Yeah.
I still had a full ride. I was not willing to leave my program because of dangling more money from another school. And I think that there are things about loyalty and commitment that can be learned through sport. That doesn't have to even be at this high level, but I do think that that's part of this process. And I think leadership has an onus on them to help build that loyalty to the brand as best as they can.
Yep.
You know, you're not going to get everybody, but I do think that's the responsibility of leadership, to say, this is the culture, this is what we want, and we want you to buy into it.
Yep. 100%. Okay. Thank you guys. That was a great topic to dive into. I think this next one though, should be some fun because the NBA players are going
Warriors.
on.
Sorry, buddy.
They have
Got
been, we've been getting torched, but hey, now it's going to come to Denver.
I didn't see last night's game though.
Oh, they scored 70 points in 20 minutes.
Denver is not beating Golden State. I'm sorry, Keegan.
Was
it's not happening.
Insane.
Oh, what a joke.
It was absolute. Jordan Poole, Poole, Thompson,
Yeah.
Curry. It's like the Splash Bros and the pool party. It is absolutely insane how many.
Too quick.
The team is too well put together. I mean, obviously, complete and total hats off to Steve Kerr. And
I was going to say, talk about leadership with that man, Steve Kerr.
Steve Kerr is an incredible coach, and it speaks for itself. And he even, I think during their first big run through the mid 2010s, I think, 2013 to 2018 or something like that.
Yep.
They're working with, their team was working with like Tony Robbins, right? To have better team culture, better player ownership. And clearly it's rubbed off. It's almost like this crap matters. But
Heaven forbid, we're onto something. We're onto something, gentlemen.
Right. So moving over to the East Coast, the 76ers and the Toronto Raptors, throughout the first two games, there has been, obviously referee involvement with every single game that's gone on out there. And there was an exchange between Joel Embiid and Nick Nurse, the coach for the Raptors, where Joel Embiid told him to stop bitching about calls. And Nick Nurse obviously had called a bunch of stuff out because he felt like Joel Embiid had been getting away with a lot of ticky-tack fouls that he should have been getting called on him. And obviously when you go into the playoffs, there's a lot more physicality because there's a lot more on the line. Hey, you're here, you're in the playoffs. We're all going for the championship here, and everything's turned up just a little bit. The emotion, and you're playing the same team. Sometimes you're going to a series of 7. You go all the way to 7. So you get sick of seeing other people's faces, right? So it's very emotional. But this brings up a very, very good topic, I think, when it comes to how individuals react to factors they can't control. So first and foremost, I would love to hear, and this is probably good because Morgan, you played rugby, Bill, you and I are football, Kim played soccer. What are some of the biggest out of your control factors that you faced when you were playing? Bill, I'm coming to you first.
Oh. Well, I mean, while playing, I think the officials will get, that's the easy one. I mean, you have injury, you don't feel good, off nights, the travel. I mean, those are all things I know you touched on briefly. One of the things that to me strikes me different is it's so moody nowadays, right? Like, I mean, you knew when I was growing up, Pistons, Bulls, you knew it was coming. Lakers, Celtics, Sixers, Celtics, like you knew those because back to Morgan's point, the teams, right? Like there was a buildup. Nobody cared when the Lakers blew out whoever, Sacramento and stuff. It was like, yeah, whatever. Let's get to the big fight. And
Celtics,
now
big time.
it's all the time. It's just so moody, which is crazy. So, I mean, I don't know. There seems to be more out of their control, just on an individual basis. The officials one, that's the one that drives me nuts. And I'm a coach, and if anybody I know is listening to this, they're going to be like, oh, my Lord, he's going to talk about being nice to the officials. But I do think, we're seeing more now, because I think from a general overview, officials are like, fine, officiate your own game. We'll call the really, really big ones. We saw it in the NCAA tournament, men's and women's. I think they're just saying, listen, you're going to yell at us one way or the other. You figure it out. So I think we've that pendulum swung the other way. Like, it's not every call.
Yep. Kim, biggest factors out of your control when it came to your sport?
Obviously the refs for sure. Heckling fans is something that people struggle with, right? Weather, especially for outside sports, and how people manage the weather, because I didn't do very well in super cold games. So if we're playing back east, it was very difficult to manage your mental state when you're playing from California all the way to back east, and there's ice and snow on the ground, right? I think, obviously other coaches, other players, injuries is always a big one. But my belief is that referees should never alter the outcome of a game, or umpires, etc. So there's big calls that those folks are tasked to make, right? The fundamental role of an official is to prevent injury, not just hold people accountable to the rules and regulations of the game. And so I think depending on certain things, especially as you get into playoffs, we know it's going to get more heated. That tempers are going to flare. That people are going to have a chip on their shoulder. That it's a make it or break it. You have to win a certain number of games in a series with the NBA, right? In tournaments, it's all or nothing, right? And you mentioned before we got on air the idea about PKs and how that affects the game of soccer. So there's lots of things that I think referees are probably the biggest thing we can't control.
Yep. Morgan, biggest factors that athletes cannot control?
For me, growing up playing baseball, playing lots of played soccer, played volleyball, played basketball, ended up playing rugby in college. The big thing, I'm not going to talk about injuries because that's something you can't control, but humans, you can't control humans. In rugby, the sidelines were filled with people when we had big games, right? We were in a super league. It's called the Super League. It was UConn, the state school, and then there was Brown, Yale, Harvard, Dartmouth. I mean, it was like all these Ivy League schools and then UConn. So every time we played, it was kind of a big deal because we were good. And I remember a couple of times being on the sidelines, one time in particular against Harvard. And this guy was like, I went out and I caught a ball out of bounds, and I ran out of bounds, and he just started yelling at me. And I got pissed, and I was like, what? And, I didn't lose my cool or anything, but I remembered it, and I played a little harder. I just wanted to win a little bit more. And so I get it. Like Kyrie Irving. I mean, there's a lot of things I could say about Kyrie Irving, but he gives a finger to a stand, a guy in the person in the stand, and he tells another person, again, to suck his, what. I mean, there's certain things that he says throughout his career, and my son was talking the other day, we were watching basketball. We love basketball. So that's the thing we watch. He plays basketball at high school level. I think we've talked about this before. And how many times we talk about where no NBA player these days did a complete obvious foul and raise their hands. Like what? So again, it goes back to humans. You can't control them. Refs are human. You mess with them, they're going to mess with you back. They're just human. I know what the coaches are doing, right? They're trying to get the next call. They're not going after this call. They're not bitching about this call. They're bitching about the next call. Thanks for not letting it beep on me, Keegan. I appreciate you.
I was sitting there. I was like, I stopped it. Should I have
let me
stopped
riff for just a few seconds? I was trying to speed up my conversation.
Good job.
Thank you.
That was me. That was a no call. I was like, all right, let it play.
Yeah.
Let it play.
I still have more to say, but I knew you were waiting. I saw you looking at the clock.
I'm sitting here staring at the clock, just like, he'll see me. Biggest thing I think people can't control, I think, Morgan, you hit on it really, really well, is other human beings. I mean, and Kim, you mentioned people in the stands. We've all said refs. And Kim, you mentioned weather. There's so many factors that people just can't control when it comes to the games. And the number one thing that people try and do is get into a position where they can try and control the uncontrollables. Mm-hmm. And obviously that's going to frustrate anybody. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter how the game is going. You don't control if a ref makes a call or doesn't make a call. You don't control if it rains or if it doesn't rain. You don't control if a bird flies in front of your pitch and you're Mark Johnson, you're throwing heat and you blow up
a bird.
right?
Poor
You don't
thing.
control some of these things, but there's so many times where things happen and then people try and put themselves in a position to say, here's how we can better play this. Here's how we can influence the uninfluenceables. And it's just going to drive people insane. And it's one of the things that I think we see a lot of, especially in the sports where a call can mean everything. You see it in soccer, specifically in men's soccer, the floppage plays. We see it all the time. I think
The men do it much more than the women, have to say that.
men do it a lot. I think women are tough as hell when it comes to soccer. I've seen some of the highlights where things should have been called and they weren't. And women are all
Abby
bloody in the
Wambach
face.
putting stitches in her head and going back in the game.
It's nuts. It's nuts. So controlling the uncontrollables is ridiculous. So here's the next thing that I want to talk about, because the other side, right? Nick Nurse saying, hey, can I please buy a call here? There's stuff going on. Joel Embiid saying, stop bitching about the referees, right? Now, obviously, there's plenty of ways you could take that. It's just like, him taking a jab or him being like, you could see it in one of 1,000 ways. Dude, like, you can't control it. He'll call it if he sees it. He clearly doesn't see it. I haven't paid him, right? So my other side of this is when there are things you can't control, I want to understand from each of your all's perspectives, maybe the best way in which an athlete can deal with the uncontrollables so that they can better put themselves into a position where it doesn't take over the game for them, where they can still play free and let the uncontrollables just remain uncontrollable and they can just play free. Morgan, I'm coming to you first.
Practice, 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 practice. The only thing you can control is yourself, right? We talk about it in mental wellness. We talk about it. The easiest thing to change is yourself. You can't change. Keegan, I'm not going to change you and your habits really right off the bat, right? I can't tell you what to do. You've got to, take some onus on yourself, and you got to say, I want to do this, right? It's that, cycle of thoughts that go through your head. So the biggest thing for me is practice. You fall back to what you practice. You don't, jump ahead to the occasion, right? Those big stage moments. People get nervous. You have to control what you can control. And you can't, like you said, we talked about weather, injury, other people, all these things that are good, people shouting at you, and if you really get in the zone, as people talk about, you don't hear that stuff anyways. You don't see that distractions, as a ref, a friend of mine coaches refs, high school basketball, and he was coaching my ref with my son's basketball game. And I was like, hey, don't make the game about you, right? As he was going out on the floor, right? Laughing, like, but that's it. You don't want to make the game about you, but sometimes they do, because we talk about they're human. And the only thing you can control is you. So to do that, you need to get into the flow. And how do you get into the flow? You practice. You practice your craft until you don't have to practice it, and as much anymore, but you keep practicing. But it's just about practice. And that's about, controlling your own emotions, learning how to be mindful, learning how to meditate, do some yoga, relax, do some breathing. The biggest thing I see when people take a deep breath before a free throw, I'm more sure that they're probably going to make it. And sometimes you see guys just going up there just freaking hooking up shots. There was a guy the other day, I can't remember, my son and I were watching it, and he just got up to the line, bounced it once, and it was like missed it. He made the second one. We couldn't believe he made the second one. But that's me.
Kim, thoughts, how you start to put yourself in a position where the uncontrollables can just remain uncontrolled and you can double down on yourself and get a better outcome?
I am a huge believer in visualization before the event. And, teaching youth and younger athletes to practice what if moments and to visualize what if moments. If this happens, what do you see yourself doing in response? If this happens, what do you do? And you literally can walk them through that and teach them how to do that. And you see this at high level, high performing athletes when they have the mental coaches that do that high performance training of in the spotlight, where you're playing with the crowd noise, right? And you have all the hecklers and stuff behind the basket, or you're playing in stadium for football and it's so loud that you can't even hear the play calls, right? And they practice, just like Morgan said, in these situations, situational preparation will allow you to see what your physiological and mental response is when that situation actually happens. I think military would be a great example of what they do to put people under pressure situations that obviously not going to put in the whole dynamic of killing people, et cetera. But when we're talking about military and the police and the high performance that you have to perform under pressure, getting kids and athletes as they get older to perform under pressure can be done it has to be done prior to being in a situation.
Absolutely. Bill, your thoughts?
Well, first off, I would like to thank all of you. Keep practicing seemed to be a very good theme there. So that
Yes.
near and dear to my heart. So
Hashtag keep practicing.
yeah, that should be about it, right? I should give you back a minute and 10 seconds. I agree 100%. And I think the challenge is, Kim, you brought it up a little bit, is the willingness of coaches to practice things that aren't related to just X's and O's or winning and losing, so to speak. It's that commitment to, you brought up Navy SEALs. There's a reason, right? Like most people don't make it through, let alone even sign up. So I think that, your ability to practice hostile environments, pressure situations, in football, you practice goal line situations, end of game situations, onside kicks. You do that in all the different sports and the scenarios. But then the other things are, we talk about it in some of our programs: composure, focus, influence, joy, those types of aspects. How do you allow your players to practice that? And then also, what do you give them to be able to look at that on their own time and build some of their own resilience? That's an amazing concept, isn't it, Morgan?
I think one of the big things, especially when it comes to the uncontrollables in a sport that can allow people to perform better, is going to come around discipline, right? When you practice and you put in disciplines in your training, and whether it's implicit practice, you're working on one very specific part of your game, and you're working on the entire gambit of your game. You're not practicing the habit of talking back to a coach, to another player, to a referee. You're not practicing actually engaging with things that you don't control, because why practice that? You don't control it. So therefore you don't practice it. So when it comes to stressful situations, and I heard this put really, really well right before actually this conversation, there's this post made by Limitless Minds. I love the work that Russell Wilson and the team over there at Limitless Minds is doing. And one thing he said was having an adversity tolerance. He said, I surround myself with people who have a high adversity tolerance, so that when things get rough, when situations come up in which there are factors that you can't control, how do you deal with that stuff? Because the people who deal with it well and can lock back into the disciplines, the core ones that breed good results naturally, are the people he wants to surround himself with. And that's why somebody like Russell Wilson is, you look at him, you're like, the guy's a winner. I don't care who you are. He is. I think that's a huge thing that I love about his game and the way that he plays. So big takeaways. This could be from first topic, whether it's about, holdouts and the balance between business and sports, if you're an athlete, or controlling the uncontrollables. And I will start this one off. I think one of the big things was that I take away is, number one, visualization. Kim, I love what you said about visualization, seeing events before they happen, and actually putting yourself in a situation where you can almost mentally simulate something so that you understand how you would react in a moment with your best self. Because when you visualize something, you don't visualize yourself as, like a pile of crap. You envision yourself probably harnessing all of your potential and using it to its fullest ability. And when you're able to constantly do that, you just put your brain in a situation where it's going to try and set yourself up to recreate that. And by doing that, you're eliminating distractions that come in, or when they come in, it feels weird. It feels foreign. And so you're more acute to some of those things as they come in, and you're better prepared to be able to deal with them. Morgan, big takeaway.
I think what you just said before about adversity and being able to handle adversity, Russell Wilson. And, you know, I tie a lot of things to my family, to my son, because he's the one I'm working with a lot right now when it comes to basketball and sports. And he's very even keeled, you know, doesn't let the highs get too high, doesn't let the lows get too low. You know, I've kind of taught him or told him about those things. And you see other teammates around him let things really get to them. And, you know, you love to see the passion, right? You want to see that kid that gets fired up. And, you know, I was also, I think we might have talked about, but I was also that kid that, you know, was really excited when we won. And, you know, I'd be so mad that we lost, I would cry, right? I was that guy. And, you know, but seeing him being like, it matters because I know he wants to win, because when he was younger and we would play basketball, I would let him win sometimes, but I would win just to make sure he knows, right? And I want to make sure his skills keep progressing.
Establish the pecking order.
Yes.
Well, I wanted to make sure he has to have that skill to just continue to try and beat me. Now, honestly, I can't. He's 6'2", he's dunking. I just can't compete with him anymore. If he really wanted to beat me, he knows that now.
To be able to keep you in the game long enough.
Yeah, that, you know what, the knees do. So, but I see him. And because I know when we were younger, he would swing at me when he would lose. So I know he was passionate, but now he's very even keeled. And so I look at that, being able to handle the adversity, you know, the ups and the downs. But then you also see sometimes what I imagine other people are saying as lack of passion. So it's interesting where you draw that line of being able to handle adversity and also handle the same side where's the passion. And so it's interesting. That's my takeaway from that is. And that's one of the things that I'm gonna, you know, instill is the drive and the passion is there, but also sometimes, you know, we talk about basketball, you talk about athleticism, you know, the way something looks and the way you see and visualize something from a coach perspective or another person, the way somebody runs, you can kind of automatically, you know, us as athletes, you see somebody running, you know, whether they're an athlete or not. You see somebody throw, you know, right away, right? If that person's an athlete or not. You know, whether they shoot a basketball, how they do certain things, it matters. And we had to fix this shot because we were talking about it was optics. You know, it doesn't look like a good shot. You might have good accuracy from the three, but it doesn't look good. So you're going to get 2 attempts and the coach is going to be like, nah, I don't think so. Right. So
like, that's not the smoothest jumper I've ever seen. So,
yeah, so we had to work on it. But, you know, enough about the family in mind, but going back to that adversity thing, I think that's something that struck with me, this talk.
Bill, big takeaway from tonight.
I'm going to go solution based here, right? So listen to us talk and everything I think should come full circle eventually. You know, we've added so much in all the games. If there's one thing we've done, going back to officials, we've taken their accountability away, and meaning their ability to have built-in accountabilities for reactions. I remember it was 4th or 5th grade, YMCA basketball. I was horrible at basketball. In Waterloo, Iowa, I was playing. I fouled a kid, and I didn't raise my hand. You guys remember? That used to be a rule. That was acknowledgement that basically, I understand your call. It's on me, and then you moved on. And I got a technical, and I didn't even know the game. Not because I threw a fit. I just didn't know I was supposed to raise my hand. I'm also the kid in my freshman year of high school, you know, when people could be honest with players. When my basketball coach reminded me, they did offer wrestling and powerlifting. So, but
son, let me talk to you for a hot moment. I've got a great idea.
I appreciated it. You know, it helped me out. But that being said, I think we have to be able to give some accountability measures at every level. So mom and dad can still scream in the stand, and people have to figure out how to deal with them. I don't know how we eliminate all of that craziness. But I do believe on a court, if it's basketball, it's kind of built into the history of the game that people like to make fun of in baseball. You can question a ball or strike. There are certain words you can't say, and there's certain ways you cannot stare at an umpire, or you will get run out of the game. And you just learn that if you want to play. And so I think we have to look at some of those things. Let's end some of the, you know, throwing the hands and all this and all that. Let's go back a little bit. quick accountability. Hey, listen, they're doing trials of all this other stuff, right? Cameras and play clocks and communications. Let's try something that actually worked back in 1950, 60, 70, and 80 and see. I'll bet people figure it out, right? Because they don't want to get teed up once or twice, and now all of a sudden you're out of the game after a quarter or two. You're going to learn how to, acclimate to it and maybe lose some of the drama. I don't know.
Yeah. Kim, bring us home. Big takeaway.
I think, to me, fundamentally, both topics are tied together. And I think they link to a little bit of what you were just touching on, Bill, is accountability. But I want to bring it to broad spectrum. What do sports teach us in life? And the value of sportsmanship, the value of team, the value of individual play, expectation. You get placed on a better team, the better you become. And you keep going through that process because you earned it, right? And ultimately, the culmination, hopefully for professional athletes, both male and female, is to get the bag, right? To get the money in at the end of the day, to take care of yourself and your family if you're competing at a high level. But to me, fundamentally, it still goes back to the definition of sportsmanship and accountability to behavior and to rules and regulations, et cetera. And being passionate about something, you can be, I was just like you, Morgan. I ride my highs and I ride my lows, and I always have done it. And it's been the difficult bane of my existence for my coaches when I would focus on a mistake and the game is going 3 minutes later and I'm still focused on my bad pass that I just did, right? And I think those things have to do with care and compassion and intensity of the love of the game that I hold for the sport that I played, and spilling over our emotions and spilling over all of those things. I think sportsmanship is really tied to some of those fundamental beliefs about passion and accountability and doing it the right way and earning it. And I think getting the reward of the higher level games and the higher level play, we are held under a microscope the higher we are, right? And I think we have to still depict those fundamental beliefs that we had when we first started, that we need to do that at the highest level of how do we carry ourselves and how are we seen. And now that we're in those glass houses with social media and everything else, I think that's really powerful. I mean, someone could take a video recorder and you lost your mind doing something on a sideline and your entire career is gone because you screwed up you screamed and yelled at some official at a game, a youth sports game.
Yeah.
I mean,
and the exact opposite can happen too. Who here has seen, I think it was UCLA, who here has seen the clip of the guy who's walking back to the other side of the court with his head down and a teammate comes over.
Oh, and he lifts his
on
head
back
up
and lifts his chin.
He lifts his head up.
Yeah.
No
Went
shame. Lift your head up.
viral. It is amazing. Like in Kim, you hit the nail on the head in a split second. It's a decision that you get to make. How do you want to respond to some of these things? Because either way, it could either catapult your career in the way that in a coach who sees that from the league says, this guy's different, right? This guy has a tolerance for adversity. Or they could look at someone who's sitting there bitching, moaning, throwing Gatorade and all this other stuff on the sidelines.
Or being a coach and punching the other coach because you're mad at something.
Yeah, being a total a-hole. And they're just like, yeah, no, this guy has no ability to keep his composure.
Yeah.
No, as always, amazing conversation tonight, amazing topics. If anybody who is listening to this or watching this, if you're watching this on YouTube, if you're listening to this on any podcast platform, please feel free to, let us know what you think. Who do you agree with? What good points came out of this for you? If you want to get more information about any of the individuals on here, just leave a comment or reach out to any one of us. We're all very active on all social media. I know we all have a presence on LinkedIn. I think most of us have a presence on other social media platforms. I'll make sure that I start posting some of those things for links on how you can get in touch with us or just follow us and, learn more about us outside of just this platform. But as always, this is an awesome conversation. Can't wait for next week. You guys are incredible as always. And yeah, just an all around thank you. Appreciate every one of you.
Thanks, guys. Nice
Thank
to see
you. Appreciate it.
Nice work.
That was fun.
you.